Hello and welcome. My name is Frybread002, and today I will be talking about how to play with the Bastion on your team and how to play against the Bastion when you are on a tank. And for the most part, I'm going to be talking in concepts and principles. And I'm not going to be really talking about very specific hero matchups just because there are far more in depth guides on how to encounter a Bastion with a very specific hero. What a lot of those guides fail to really mention is concepts and ideas, really. Now, for the most part, I will be getting straight to the point, and once I get to a certain point, I will be elaborating on very key moments in the game here. And to kind of give an idea here, we got into round 3 for Route 66, and it wasn't until this third round when the enemy decided to play a Bastion on their turn for defense to really stop us from moving the payload. Now, one of the things I kind of want to talk about is this specific map on Route 66. For the most part, because of the unique nature of this game mode, or rather, playing a Bastion when there's a payload involved, it's more dynamic than just playing a bunker cop or playing a pirate ship. And that's going to be largely dictated by the nature of the map itself. Because the payload follows narrow pathways that has a lot of intersecting highways or paths that lead off to the flanks and kind of crisscross with each other, as well as having elevated terrain. Playing a pirate ship on this one's rather interesting just because of the many hiding places that people have to get away from the pirate ship, as well as flank the pirate ship, right? And the same thing can be said if you are on the defense as well. Setting up on one position is rather a difficult thing to maintain for the entirety of the game just because the payload will kind of move on by if you're not careful. And I'll explain that moment when we get to it. But to kind of get things started here, is that hero I'm playing is Orisa. And there's no real particular reason for me to play Orisa against a Bastion, other than just having a preference to play Orisa over anything else, really. Are there other characters that can do what I'm gonna do a lot better? Maybe. I wouldn't know, because I did it with Orisa. That would be my only caveat. Now, let's go see how the enemy set it up. I'm gonna go pause it. Now, playing with double barriers for the Bastion is rather standard procedure for a lot of teams out there. Now, to kind of put things into perspective, it's very important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of Bastion. Bastion obviously has two modes that every player is familiar with. His recon mode, the mode you see right now, where he is mobile and he has access to the smaller gun on his right arm. His other mode, which is more notable and rather infamous throughout the entire community, is his sentry mode, or his turret form, if you may. And it's important that the Bastion player knows how to switch between both his sentry and his recon mode, and it's more about knowing where to switch and how to position yourself. Now, most Bastion compositions, most Bastion players, I should actually preference, is going to have a great time destroying the enemy when they are attacking him from the front, where he has open sight lines and he has little to no cover to worry about. And if that did not make any sense, imagine if Bastion was right here, right? And I see this kind of happen every once in a while for me to actually bring this up, but I do see Bastion compositions and have the Bastion player set up in this area right here on your screen. And they'll just shoot down all day, really. And anything in front of the straight freight trains and the payload is what we can call no man's land. Anything beyond the space of the payload in front of it is a rather I wasn't gonna say a dangerous position to be in, but it's just more apt to call it no man's land. You're not gonna really survive out in the open, and that's where Bastion's always gonna thrive. Where he is gonna have difficulty is when he's having to shoot at targets that are constantly ducking in and out of cover. So having to, well, let me get back over into this position to kind of set it up, quite set it up somewhat. Basically, Bastion's never going to shoot or kill anything that is hiding behind cover, like the payload and the freight trains, which is kind of an obvious thing to say. But I really want to demonstrate how people actually ignore that fact. Now, for this first part of the gameplay here, we're going to look at it from the Bastion's point of view. And we're just going to hit play. And I'm going to be slowing down the gameplay for a lot of instances. Alright, let's get started. So this is the enemy Bastion that I'm going to be playing into. And this is going to be a lot of Bastion firing into a payload and not really killing anything. And that's because I'm making use of the payload as cover. And everyone else on my team is hiding behind cover as well. So right now our goal isn't to get a kill, it's just to move the payload forward as far as we can. May draws aggro away from Bastion, and the team moves in while he's distracted. While this is going on, payload is being moved forward, and we are now out of his line of sight, forcing him to reposition. And at this point, things start to turn bad for us after they get a kill. And for the most part, it leads all downhill, which is rather fine for my team. And I'll explain after this fight is over. Okay. I'm gonna pause it. Alright, so a lot of what we saw from the Bastion's point of view was him suppressing my team and keeping us behind cover. And then once someone drew his attention away from us and we moved the payload forward and forced the Bastion to reposition, all this enemy Bastion really had to do was just set up and keep us suppressed from finding him out in the open. And his team had to do the rest of the work, mopping up kills. Bastion had an easy time. The rest of his team had to work for the kills. Now, from my side of things, and we're going to look at it. Let's go back. I must rejoin my... Okay, pause. Okay, so on my side of things here, we had a really rough first round. But the second round was pretty easy for us. Unfortunately, we had only 1 minute to work with, compared to the enemy having 3 minutes, or close to 4 minutes. In my particular scenario, I'm playing with a bunch of platinum and gold players here, as well as not being in team chats, and that's just because at this particular rank, I get a lot of negative trash talk concerning my recent play. Basically, I get a lot of people telling me to switch, which is why I'm out of team chats. In most cases, I would actually be in team chat, but the reason why is because, well, the reason why I'm not in team chat is because I know what the hell I'm doing. And I'm going to show it to you. Show it to you, my bad. Now, the general strategy I'm adopting right now is to push the payload as far as I can. I'm already having a good hunch that they're going to be playing a Bastion composition, or something worse, like say Torbjorn or Symmetra. And for the most part, I'm not really concerned about getting kills. I care more about keeping the enemy off the payload so I can keep it moving, because that's the objective. And when you play objective-based game modes, kills are always going to be a secondary or tertiary factor. So let's go back to my point of view and hit play. And one of the early ways you can actually identify a rather insidious composition you'll be playing against is figuring out where the enemy engages you at. So basically, it's really quiet when you come out the doors. You don't see any action at all. So this tells me that they're going to be on top of that gas station. Not a guarantee I'm seeing a Bastion, but keeping my expectations rather tempered. So I pop out of the corner to confirm it, and yeah, I see Bastion. I'm going to pause it. And it's at this point that I'm going to be using a idea called cover and move. And for cover and move, it helps to have a coordinated team to kind of pull this off. Seeing as how I'm not in team chat, I can't coordinate with my team here. So I'm going to refer to the most logical thing, which is move the payload and stay behind cover here. So this is what it looks like. I'm not going to bother popping my head out and shooting at the Bastion because I can't penetrate those shields. And I'm not going to get a kill at all. So move the objective along. Pause. So, when main brings up her wall, I'm going to put up a shield to buy me a little bit extra protection. I know it's going to get shredded instantly, but it's better than having no protection at all. And more importantly, because Ice Wall blocks the line of sight for my enemy, I am afforded some type of maneuvering. So, instead of staying behind a payload where I was indeed being shot up at, I'm going to reposition to a much more safer spot. And, pause. When the enemy,
no choice but to attack.
When the enemy is on that, when the enemy is on the high ground here, and you really can't assault them, one, don't even bother attacking them at all if you can't even get up there. So, focus on a more defensive posture. In this case, get right underneath them. A lot of players, when they recognize it, will call this hugging the wall. Hug the wall that's right underneath them. If you happen to be on a controller, for example, to shoot down and shoot at an enemy who's slightly angled. If I had to kind of think about it or give you a representation, basically, there's a good chance that my enemy is not used to shooting at a target that's downward from them, and downward at a slightly awkward position to the left or right. That's what I'm banking on as well. Now, another thing I kind of want to bring up is you don't want to rely on the enemy doing something for you, right? So, one, even though I'm relying on the enemy to have a hard time shooting at me at a downward position because of their low rank, I also know that I shouldn't be doing that. It's a bit of a gamble is what I'm doing here, but because I'm pressed for time, I'm rolling the die here. Thankfully, it's going to work out. You'll see in the long run. But other than that, though, I shoot at what I can hit and just keep the payload moving. Now, I'm entering to an area on the map where I'm being surrounded on all sides here, which is a position you never want to be in general. When the enemy's on the high ground, you can shoot over your shields, and when the enemy is surrounding you on all sides, you are in a kill zone right here. Nothing you really do is going to save you from destruction. And honestly, I'm rather proud we got this kill as far as we did on my turn for attack. With that being said, I already know that anything we do here is going to result in a failure. So I'm just going to wait for the round to end. Okay, so with that said, here comes the more important excuse me. Apologies. Here comes the more important fight, actually, which is our turn for defense. Oh, it's interesting payload still there. Now, my team is going to be running our own Bastion composition as well. And this is one of the things that we do entirely different that leads to us having a successful hold. Now, I'm gonna pause it, or keep it playing actually, and let us set up so I can kind of explain it to you.
Ready for battle.
Skip ahead. Here we go.
Ready for battle.
Let the character models load in. Let the team get into place. So, gonna pause the batch and dictate where he wants to set up. If he wants to be on this corner, I'm gonna support him on that. All right. I'm not in team chat. I can't communicate with my team, so I'm not gonna argue with their choices. I'm gonna do my best to make it work. That's your main goal as a tank. It doesn't matter if you're a Roadhog or a Zarya. I'd rather you don't play Roadhog or Zarya if you're trying to run a Bastion composition, because it's going to be a lot harder for you to find success running with the Zarya or Roadhog. You can do it, alright, but it's going to be very difficult. That's the caveat. Now, it's important that I kind of get a frame of reference to see what Bastion sees, right? Because when I engage the enemy, I want them to be on my terms. Or I'm not going to engage at all. So what are my terms, right? Well, if Bastion's going to be here, I want the enemy to be in this position right here for as much as possible. So, anytime I see the enemy going to flank to the sides at all, I'm going to engage them because I want my Bastion to be focused on just the front line, keeping them suppressed. If you can get a kill, that's awesome. But more importantly, if we can keep them off the payload, that's even better. Because kills up until the clock reaches 0 are going to be unimportant. Why would they be unimportant? Well, let's look at it this way here. The only way you win this game mode is keeping the enemy off the objective. The best way to do that is a kill, and it's amazing once you acquire it, but that's not always going to be the case. So the next best thing you can do is keep them off. And how you keep them off is you can physically move them off with abilities like Orisa's Halt, or any type of ability that can boop them around, like Elusio Boop. I guess Sigma's Gravitic Flex, for example. But the other way you can do it is physically scare, or not physically, psychologically intimidate them, scare them off. And that then scares a player like a Bastion having the high ground on you. You already saw it from my point of view earlier in the game when I was hiding behind a payload and I had to seek better positioning so I wouldn't be shot at. That's what it looks like being under that type of firepower. I was already being suppressed. And because I was under that position, I know that the enemy will feel the exact same thing when they come into that corner as well. So it's important I keep the enemy in Bastion's line of sight. If they're out of the Bastion's line of sight, that's fine. But the moment they start coming for his sides, I'm going to start protecting it. And as a tank, it's going to be very important that you protect his sides. You don't want to be in a position where you have to protect Bastion from the front, as well as protect Bastion from the sides. You don't want to be in that position at all. So you do whatever you can to mitigate that. If not, deny it outright. So, go to my point of view. And for the most part, and I'm going to before the game starts, I also want to take a moment to really praise my team for being rather bold for a lot of our strategies and tactics here. Now, for the most part, it's just basically the team as a whole taking initiatives to try to increase our odds of success. For example, having a Torbjorn turret right there, getting up a crossfire. It's going to pay off later on in the end. And as a whole, the whole team contributes to the team fight. So let's begin.
2, 1. Attackers incoming. Barrier active. Stop the payload.
Be careful out there.
And I'm going to do my best to avoid stopping and pausing so I can keep this kind of flowing. But yeah. Enemy team keeps popping their head out. I do a perimeter check, and when I see Reaper, I keep my awareness in this general location, right? Check on Bastion every once in a while. Put up my shield again. Cool. Once we got that direct to Bastion's flank dealt with, I can focus on the front again. But I'm not going to ignore the sides. Now for whatever reason, Moira decides to overextend. I'm guessing she ran out of healing juice. Doesn't matter. Fact is, where I'm now down, so gotta be more cautious. Oh. Now, the one thing I want to really bring up is this is again an area that I want the enemy to be in. Is I want to know exactly where they're coming from, and because I saw them right here, I know that they're going to be making a move soon because I recently last saw some enemies down by the payload, so I know they're coming in from two different fronts. And for the most part, I want Bastion to only focus on one thing while I get his blind side. And Reinhardt's kind of doing the same thing as well. He knows that the enemy is repositioning, and he goes to help him out. Now, when this happens right here, when you got a shield in the front of the Bastion, you want to keep it there, and then you're going to want to body block for the sides of the Bastion. Because for the most part, between the tank and the Bastion, Bastion is going to be the one doing the killing. It's going to be unlikely that you actually get a kill. If you can get a kill in the scenario that I was just in, where we saw Reaper and Baptiste right here, if you can get a kill in that scenario as a tank, that's amazing, that's beautiful. But to be realistic, as an Orisa, I'm not going to be able to kill anything right here, so the next best thing I'm going to do is keep the Bastion safe. Because if they can't keep the Bastion, if the enemy right here can't kill the Bastion, then the Bastion is going to keep the enemy off the payload. And again, the whole goal is to keep the enemy off the payload so it doesn't reach the end. Go back to my point of view. Replant my shield down, and body block for Bastion. And I'm happy that the mortar helps out with the kill right there, because it ends the engagement quicker. I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna go back. And I really meant it that I just gotta praise the whole team for contributing to the whole team fight as a whole, because I'm gonna show you what it's like to be a DPS under the pressure of being surrounded by all sides. And this is kind of a rather vague and abstract concept to talk about, but the general expectations for the DPS is to apparently pop off, and I say that in quotation marks. Well, I can tell you as a DPS main that you can win a lot of gunfights without killing anyone if you can get a good position over them. So, you're going to see Bastion kind of freak out for a hot second here. And that's because he's being fired upon from all sides. And he knows he has to focus on the front line. Actually, no, sorry. I missed it. I went... Right here, right here. Okay. Give it a hot second. In the moment that Bastion gets surrounded on all sides, you will see him freak out. Right here. Now, it was rather subtle. It was rather subtle. So, it was about right here is when you kind of see him freak out. And it will be a little bit obvious to others and not so obvious to most. So the reason why I would say Bastion is freaking out, when I look at it from his perspective, and I'm going to slow it down by a whole lot, is he has a Reaper coming in to him directly, blitzing, jump out coming in from the front, and he's being shot from the side as well, right? So who does Bastion focus on? So, as a tank, what you want to do is you want to limit the stress that your DPS is feeling and make their jobs easier by, well, I'm not going to say by backing them up because that's even more abstract and weird, but it's more about if Bastion is shooting at one target, right, I need to figure out is what he's shooting at equally valuable, or do I let him do his thing and do my own thing and cover his sides? How do I gauge which is more valuable? There. Well, before I answer that question, we're gonna finish off this next part from Bastion's point of view, because it's rather important. because for the most part, Bastion activates his ults. Doesn't really get any value out of it, and so it feels like a wasted ultimates because he can't get out. Feels like, and this is just my opinion based on the point of view I'm watching it from. It feels like he uses this ultimate in a panic to scare them off, which is fine, but I really felt like that was unnecessary. So yeah, there was a Bastion right in front of him when we slow it down, but we see him flicker off to the right side to kill like support. So now I'm gonna pause it. Actually, hold on, not yet. Full speed. Okay, pause it. I'm gonna go back. Go back again, just so we can get it really ingrained into your mind. Okay, I'm gonna pause, let the character models load in. Right about there. Okay, so. And to recap, enemy makes blitz at the Bastion, kind of freaks out, and so he activates his ultimate in retaliation. Hopefully, it kind of scares them off. And as a tank, this is your next important part, is keep the pressure off the Bastion. You want to draw aggro on you, win it where you can. Body block for Bastion if you have to. Now I'm going to pause it, because I really like what the Reinhardt does right here, which is he gets the heat off of Bastion, and he doesn't have to reposition. More importantly, payload doesn't move as well. And for the most part, the enemy is more focused on killing the Bastion than they are with progressing the payload, because they're into the mindset that if they kill the Bastion, it's an easy win. And I will admit, later on into the video, they do kill the Bastion and they make progress onto the payload, but they still have the rest of my team to deal with. Now we're going to look at this from my point of view, because I did bring up the question of how do you help out Bastion or your DPS when they're freaking out. And the two solutions would either be you focus fire what they're shooting at, or you cover their sides. And it's going to be one of those things that's a judgment call. Both are right answers, but you got to make sure that your right answer doesn't become the wrong answer. Okay, so now I'm going to go back, replay it, because the one thing I do is I do a quick sweep of the area to help answer that question of how to help Bastion. See the enemy right there going for a maneuver of some kind on the right side? Put my barrier back down the front to make sure that that front area is going to be secured for now, so I didn't need to worry about that. I see Reaper repositioning over here, and then I also see Baptiste. So the key thing for me is I'm going to body block for the Bastion so that he doesn't get damaged. Because if he gets... And thankfully, as a whole, armor does reduce damage you take. Bastion takes 30% less damage when he's in sentry form. And Reinhardt and Orisa have a crap ton of armor, as well as Orisa having access to Fortify. So in the rather grand scheme of things, the three of us will be taking significantly less damage compared to any other member of our team, which is why we can afford to body block. Are we concerned about feeding the enemy ult charge? Not really, because the enemy will have ultimates regardless by the end of the game. And because we had almost 4 minutes on the clock, we're going to have to deal with them at some point or another, really. And I'll kind of talk about how to handle that when we get to it. But yeah, for the most part, body block from the Bastion. Now, when I see Reaper blitz my Bastion, again, I'm going to body block for the Bastion and keep the Reaper off of Bastion. It's important that Bastion feels safe so he doesn't freak out and reposition, because I don't know if he's going to reposition from this position, and I'm more scared if he repositions into a weaker position, or a weaker, inferior position. And he will do that later on in the game, actually. But for the most part, keep him safe. Now, I'm not concerned about getting kills. I just gotta keep him off Bastion. Now, there's another part that I gotta kind of go over because I talked over it. It was that moment where I saw Reaper blitz Bastion. So, when I followed him on my screen, I was also keeping an eye on what was in the background as well, making sure that there was no enemy with him. So, follow Reaper. I also got a glimpse of the payload as well, and I want to make sure that no one's really on there. I just see one enemy, And then 1 second or split second I saw that payload, it's only one enemy. I can't actually identify it easily, to be honest. In hindsight, I know it's Junkrat, but I'm more concerned about the fact that it's only, well, it's more comforting to know that it's just one enemy on the payload. And if it's only one enemy on it, it's gonna move a little bit slow. So that's why I can make the call of just keep the enemy off of Bastion and let Bastion do his thing. Because I can kind of leave the front line unattended for a hot second. And so I continue protecting the sides. And then deposits. And to kind of put it into perspective, this is what the enemy was having to deal with as well. So, I went back 20 seconds, and this is what Baptiste was trying to do. Trying to kill the support. He gets immediately punished for that, just for being in that position. And this is why body blocking is so important. So Bastion doesn't get hit. Now, if you remember on the enemy's turn for defense, we saw that our Mei went in to go blitz the Bastion and draw attention away, right? Well, we just saw the Baptiste do the exact same thing, and the results were completely different. The difference being is intention. What is your intent for blitzing that Bastion? Do you want your team to move the payload while you have aggro of Bastion? If you want to do that, you gotta coordinate with your team when that happens, right? And the reason why it worked on my side of things is because I have a somewhat decent understanding of the human psychology and player psychology. It's important to remind yourself that on the other side of that TV screen is another human being. They got feelings and emotions, and that can be manipulated. In my case, I'm gonna do my best to kind of jog your memory here. There was a moment in the time when Mei put up her ice wall, and that obscured the vision of the enemy team as a whole. When that happened, Mei got booped up here by a Doomfist, and everyone on the enemy team was shooting at her. I knew that was happening because I'm aware of my surroundings, and so I opted to stay on the payload, and at the same time reposition so that I can still move payload and be away from that fire. The enemy team did not do any of that. So we're going to go back. And we just saw what the Baptiste was doing from his side of things, which was taking pop shots at our team. He got us down low somewhat. Good job on him, but in a situation like that, you are dependent on you getting success with your kills. If you can't get that kill, then your distraction was actually kind of for nothing. Especially if you didn't move payload. So yeah, this is as a whole. He draws aggro, and this is what his team's doing. They're kind of doing their own thing. And I'm doing my best to kind of keep everyone in frame here. Okay. Good. Pause. Now the other thing I want to highlight is what the enemy, or not the enemy, what our friendly Reinhardt was doing as well during this whole fight. Because he does a damn good job of just keeping the team safe. So, gonna press play. Actually, I'm gonna go back a little further so I get context. Pause, let the character models load in. As a whole. His shield breaks, so I put mine back down as soon as I can. And I like how he body blocks. Now, pause. The most important thing he did was he kept his focus on the front line right here, making sure that the front was safe. While that was happening, you gotta remember at this point in time that the Reaper was making a blitz onto the Bastion. Let's pause, go back out. So Reaper comes in for a flank. I know he's coming in. Thankfully, Bastion gets a kill. Pause. So yeah, as a whole, this is the most common theme throughout the entirety of the game was being aware of what the enemy was doing and picking fights that are on your terms or don't even pick those fights at all. And so we're gonna go back to my point of view, or go back to Reinhardt's point of view. That's a shield rest. I like that. Doesn't hold it up needlessly. And we're gonna watch this to the point where they make a second blitz on the Bastion. So he gets tipped off that the enemy's coming in from the right side. Sees the teleport. Gonna pause. So what I like about this Reinhardt is that when he fights back like that way, it tells the enemy that, hey, this is my area. If you want to come in, you're gonna get hit by my hammer. Which is very important to do because the psychological impact is that it tells the enemy that they will be met with resistance when they do this maneuver each time. It's important that you send that message across. If you don't, it tells the enemy that they can keep doing it over and over again. And I would show you a clip of that in this game, but I'm already running. I, the video is already long enough as it is, unfortunately, and I don't want to waste your time. So let's continue on with this point right here. Back to Reinhardt's point of view. He gets halted down, tries to get back up, but he can't help it. So, by taking the initial charge right here, he draws the aggro, he gets aggro on the whole enemy team, or half the enemy team, right? And that's good because it's better for the enemy to shoot this Reinhardt than it is to shoot the Bastion up here. 2, he also has a decent pocket on him. He is in the relative safety of his entire team because we got sightlines on the front line over here, and we can also see him down here. So he's not entirely alone. And it's important that if you find yourself in a position where Reinhardt got separated from his team, or more commonly, he did a rather random charge and took off by himself, which happened kind of right here, and it couldn't be helped because he already got pulled off. It's important that you go with him and stay with him as long as you can to increase his chances of survival so that he gets back safely. And that's what I like about the Moira doing right here, is she's actively fighting on the front line with the team. She's not just being a random heal bot. She's contributing to the team fight. And as a support player, that's a very important thing to know as well. So back to the Reinhardt. Does what he can to move back. And with the support of Coalescence, he makes a charge in, which is good. Now, you see me on the front line, ground floor. How did I end up there? I'll show you in a moment. Bastion dies. And him getting that kill was the key thing of us not losing this team fight. And for the most part, the enemy is going to reset. Now, what we saw as a whole from the Reinhardt's point of view was we saw him kind of go from taking a defensive posture with the whole team to meeting the enemy head on when they came in to invade our territory, which is great. You want to be doing that. And as things kind of escalated and evolved, we saw him get a crucial pick onto the Baptiste. And it was rather that kill that kind of forced the enemy to kind of have a huge restart, because they're not going to really start the team fight without him. And this is going to bring up the concept of winning and losing. Everyone's familiar with the concept of winning a team fight and losing in team fights. And a lot of people don't understand that there is an important distinction between the two. It's, in this case, it's not that we won the team fight, it's more of the fact that we didn't lose the team fight. The way you're able to make that distinction is, one, they only killed 2 of us, Bastion and myself, the Orisa. Whereas we kind of killed one of them as time progressed, one at a time. And we never actually did get a decisive win, but neither could the enemy. And with that being said, it's a rather de facto win for us or an alternative win condition for us because the whole point is to run down the clock. Kills are not entirely important compared to running down the clock, is what I'm trying to get at. So we're gonna go back to my point of view. Okay, I'm gonna pause.